Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's event. Your godmother is here, and I'm happy to see all of you. If you don't know why we're here, it is to celebrate this book, Darkness Most Fowl, which is a collection of bird horror. What? Yeah, and the birds do all kinds of things in this book. This bird was the brainchild of Christy Peterson Schoonover and myself. And tonight we have 6 authors. We're sort of starting at the beginning. This is the first of 3 virtual readings. The next one will be this Friday, November 14th at 7 p.m. And the final one will be Sunday, November 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern. But before I dive into my theme for tonight, which is beginnings, and let me warn you, when the godmother gets a theme, she just latches onto it like hanging onto the tiger's tail. But before I get into that, please feel free to put comments and questions in the chat box. We would love your feedback. We'd love to answer any questions that you might have. People watching this from the future who are watching the recording, you can still ask questions and make comments. Don't feel like you're being left out. You put something, I'll see it. The godmother will see it, and I will pass it along to that author or to the group. It's just like passing notes in middle school. Remember how much fun that was? We can do that. And authors, you too can feel free to chime in the chat, add social media links, anything that I haven't added that you'd like me to add, or just comments about the other readings, because this is going to be a really, really good session with these readings. What we'll do is we will have all of the readings first, and then we will open up for a discussion at the end. So, what's your favorite bird? Those of you who have read Darkness Most Fowl know that I shamelessly plagiarized this line for my introduction, but that was because it was so fitting for this book. We had our author, Kiyomi Appleton Gaines, submit her story, and when I saw this story, I was like, oh my gosh, this has to be the opening act. This has to start the book, because it just so fully encapsulates what this book means. So I'm going to have Kiyomi come to the stage right now, and I'm going to introduce her, and then she'll give us a reading. So Kiyomi Appleton Gaines is a writer of fairy tales and other fantastical things whose stories have been said to cause nightmares. She was a contributor to Art-Born Words, an anthology of art and words, Unquiet Spirits, essays by Asian women in horror, and that's when I met Kiyomi, because she dropped into the studio for that, and she made me cry. The 2023 Central Oregon Writers Guild Anthology, and Mad Scientist Journal 2019 Spring Quarterly. In 2018, she was contributing editor at Enchanted Conversation, a fairy tale magazine. Her work has also appeared in Nightmare Magazine, Quail Bell Magazine, and The Grim Reaper, among others. She lives in Bend, Oregon with her spouse, 2 marmalade cats, and a snake. So Kiyomi, whenever you are ready, go ahead and begin.
Okay. Well, thank you all for being here and for watching the recording. This is an excerpt from my story. It's called Flight and Fawn. On the drive out to camp, the dry protein bars we brought, homemade and tasteless, crumbled in my lap. I brushed the chunks into my cupped palm and let them fly out the window. "What are you doing?" Daniel demanded. "Oh my God, what are you doing?" I closed the window and brushed the remaining crumbs from my hand. "What do you mean?" He was already pulling over. He smacked his hand against my seat as he looked back to reverse up the shoulder of the highway, every move underscored, slow, deliberate, hard so I would note it. His eyes were wild, jaw clenched. He stopped and launched himself from the car, leaving his door hanging open. I got out after him, waded into the snow and tufts of grass and tree branches. He was pacing, searching the ground. Was there something in the protein bar? For a moment, I thought, he's going to propose. There was a ring in the bar. But as soon as the thought came, I knew it was impossible and felt a confused mix of shame and relief flush through me. "Birds are drawn to food on the road," he said, finally, hands flapping in emphasis down by his knees as he continued his hunched searching. That's how they get hit by cars. I can't believe. His anger took hold again, and he turned away from me, seething. They say birds have fewer taste buds than mammals. They might have liked the protein bar. I didn't say it, but the thought alone made me cringe, fearful of his reaction. Would he leave me here if I said that? I looked around me, despite the futility of the act, to show my contrition. Just get back in the car, he said. After a moment, I did. The bottoms of his jeans grew wet as he stomped around, and his arms reddened under his t-shirt from the chill. I heard a few more angry exclamations and mutterings. I should have known better. I did know better. Daniel had told me millions of birds are killed annually by vehicle collision, and over half of all fledgling deaths are due to roadways. I just hadn't been thinking. He slid back into his seat with a sigh, pushed something into my lap, and started the car, never looking at me. There were times when I asked myself how it had come to this. I sat cradling the remnants of a stranger's greasy fast food lunch, protected only by a thin, damp paper bag for hours of monotonous tree-lined highway, until he decided that it was time to stop, until he decided that my punishment had been enough. As a child at a birthday party, he had been hypnotized to experience life as a bird, as he put it. Not a chicken, he was quick to add. He would laugh when he said this if he was being charming. His tone would take a hard edge that threatened anger when he was not. I hated when he told this story if he was not feeling charming. Years later, he'd undergone hypnosis again. Therapeutically, he quit smoking, but something of the bird came back in its place. Mute swan, Cygnus allure, a large white water bird averaging 125 to 160 centimeters with a distinctive black bordered orange beak. They are most often found in temperate regions and can adapt to degraded habitat. Highly territorial, swans will kill intruders in their territory by drowning. In parts of the world, it is criminal offense to assault or harm swans because they are identified with the monarchy. What's your favorite bird? He asked me. He was obsessed with getting live birds and took us on ever more remote trips into the wild. Once, while standing at the lip of a gorge surrounded by tall pines, his foot slipped at the edge. I grabbed his pack, leaned back, felt my own foot skid. The slate and algae scent of water carried up to us on the breeze. He hung suspended for a beat too long, watching mud and rock skitter down the cliff face before stepping back, laughing. He would talk sometimes about the freedom of jumping off cliffs, taking flight. You could have killed us. I was enraged. It was early enough in our relationship that I still got mad at him. After that, dizzy on a surge of adrenaline, I thought for the first time that I might love him. He just laughed and laughed. In our most secret moments at night, he would whisper his strange thoughts. People used to believe in transmutation. It was a universal belief, he said. Man used to know that we are animals, used to know the secrets of how to transform. The only thing holding us back, he said, was fear. It was always a step of faith, a leap in some way, which led to transformation. What kind of bird would you want to be? I asked him sometimes. I tell this to the police. The detective who's been brought in from the city stares at me for a long moment, then closes his notebook. The facts are spare. I woke up and he was gone. It snowed in the night. He left his things. There were no footprints. I waited a day, then I packed up camp and I came to the ranger station. I nursed guilt under the detective's gaze. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I was saying I love this story and I love it even more hearing you read it. It's so wonderful. And thank you everyone who's putting comments in the comments section. I really appreciate that too. Now this is my favorite thing. I feel so powerful. I'm going to kick Kiyomi out of the studio. It makes me feel like queen of the studio, and bring our next reader in. So I said tonight is about beginnings, and our next reader has been with this project since its inception, conception, however you want to look at it. He and his partner in crime, Nina Darkangela, are a dynamic duo that I always go to when I need advice, and they always give me sage advice, and they always give me advice with great care. So I appreciate that. So Christy and I were still ironing things out. We turned to Lee and Nina, and they were so helpful to us. So he's really known about this book for years now, as we've been trying to get it together. And those of you who are familiar with The Godmother, you know that when I have any kind of ownership over a project, I'm going to have Andrew Forman involved in that project because we work together so well, and I really love his writing. And I invited Lee to this project because I really wanted some old school horror, and boy, did he ever deliver. So I'm going to have him come to the stage, and I'm going to give, that was just me blabbering, I'm going to give the formal introduction, so that it's a proper introduction, I should say. Andrew Forman is an author, editor, publisher, and photographer from the Hudson Valley region in New York. His fascination with the macabre began in childhood, watching old movies and reading everything he could get his hands on. His love of horror spans 3 generations, starting with his grandfather, who was a fan of the classic Hollywood monsters. I mean, who isn't? Lee has published 3 books to date. The Bury Box, Zero Perspective, and Fragments of a Damn Mind. I've read them all. They're great. Along with numerous short stories and multiple anthologies. He was a co-owner of Siren's Call Publications, a regular contributor to The Lift, and writes nonfiction pieces for various periodicals. Lee is also an administrator and member of the horror writers group Pen of the Damned, where you can find a new piece of fiction each week. And as Lee is reading, I will put his social media and links to his books in the chat. Go ahead, Lee, whenever you're ready.
I'm going to read a bit from my story titled Old Ways, and I'm going to start somewhere around the middle of the story, so I'll give you a little bit of context. The characters are a brother and sister and an uncle, and the uncle also happens to be the leader of their village. So here I'll begin. As Glynn readied for the night's events, he placed his headdress on the kitchen table. This month, Arlo had a rudimentary one to match. Glynn insisted he fully participate, and Arlo, though still not dedicated to believing in a giant unseen bird in the sky, agreed nonetheless. He figured if it made Glynn and his sister happy, why not do it? I'm glad you won't be sitting on the sidelines this time, Petra said, bringing her mask to join theirs. You've done a good job on your mask, Arlo. He nodded and smiled. I suppose it's not bad for a first try. All that matters is you do try, Glynn added. When the moon was high in the sky, the fire was lit, and everyone in the village gathered on the mesa. The drums boomed through the night. The people's feet moved in tandem as the flame grew. The sacred totem stood tall in the background. The fire's ebbing light danced up its front, feeding life into its avian eyes. Arlo placed his mask over his head and joined the mass of jubilant dancers. His body didn't move with grace, but that didn't matter to him. His only concern was keeping an eye out for the stranger. As he circled the fire pit, he kept his eyes on the crowd, looking for that other mask. His heart pounded in his chest when he saw it. The stranger danced around the fire with the villagers, moving with as much vigor as anyone else. Arlo pushed through the throng in front of him and caught up to the stranger. He grabbed his broad, muscular shoulder. Who are you? He demanded. The stranger stopped dancing and stood tall above Arlo. Others began to notice. The ritual halted. The drums went silent. All stared at their unwelcome guest. The guards came forth and readied themselves to defend the people of the village. The stranger's shadow deepened into an inky blackness darker than the night. Though he remained motionless, the silhouette elongated, blanketing all behind him. Its cast didn't match the human form from which it came. It morphed into a cloak of menacing intent. The revelers gasped at the sight before them as they backed away in terror. "Glyn!" Arlo screamed. "What do we do?" "Pray to Nebhi," Glyn yelled back. "Pray that his spirit will keep us safe from this evil that's tainted our land." As the elder, Glyn thought he knew all there was to know about their culture and the evils which resided in it. But this was unlike anything he'd imagined. He prayed as hard as he ever had while he stared wide-eyed and unblinking at the horror unfolding on the mesa. Thunder boomed from the sky as clouds rolled in and obscured the stars. Heavy rain immediately followed. Concealed by the onslaught of the downpour, the stranger walked away into the darkness, swallowed by the storm. Arlo woke the next morning to Glyn standing in his bedroom doorway. "So, do you believe now?" Arlo sat up and put his feet on the floor. "How could I not after last night? What the hell was that?" Glyn lowered his head. "I don't know, but Nebhi saved us. Although he may be a trickster from time to time, he watches over our safety. He drew the evil away with that storm. The Oshi must have aligned themselves with something foul, evil perhaps, and sent it after us. We must be vigilant, now more than ever. Our very way of life may be under threat." As much as Arlo wanted out, he felt compelled to stay, at least until his village, and most importantly his sister, was safe. "So what now?" he asked. "We're going to visit the Oshi and try to make peace with them. Hopefully we can make them see reason. I expect you'll be coming with me?" Although Glyn phrased it as a question, Arlo knew better. It was an expectation. Arlo sighed. "Of course. I'm not just going to sit on my ass while you take all the risk." "Then let's get going. It's a long walk." "Can't we just drive?" "Absolutely not." Glyn slammed a fist against the wall. "One must follow nature if one expects it to support them. So we go on foot." While Arlo dressed and gathered whatever he thought he might need for the trip, Glyn rounded up a few of the guard to accompany them. Their people hadn't interacted with one another since Glyn was only a child. They remained apart to prevent violence and the repeat of savage history. "Are you ready for this?" Glyn asked Arlo as they stood at the edge of the village, peering out across the arid landscape they intended to cross. Arlo nodded and took the first step forward. Glyn smiled, proud of the young man he raised. Arlo had always been so wrapped up in what the outside world had to offer, he never took the time to appreciate his own culture, his heritage, his lineage. And I'm going to leave it at that so I don't give too much away.
Thank you for that. That was wonderful. And make sure you're going into the comments box, everybody. That's the top box in our studio. People are giving praise in the comments. I want to make sure that you're all seeing them. So Lee, I'm going to have you move out now, and then I'm going to bring you back at the end along with everybody else. But there have been some really nice comments in the comment box. So our next author also knew about this project from the very beginning, and that's because if I know something, he knows something. When I know something, I go to my husband first, and then I go to Hideki Nakazono second and tell him. So I was having just a chat with him about this project. You know, again, Christy and I were still sort of fluffing things out, pun intended. And Hideki said, "Oh, if I were writing something for that book, I would write." And he sort of gave me, it wasn't meant to be a story pitch, but he gave me a story pitch. And I was like, well, I really want that story. Could you please write that for me? And he did. So I'm going to add him to the stage now and then read his official bio. Hideki Nakazono grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, bounced around the country a bit, and now lives there again with his family, dog, and ant farm. He is the author of 7 Falls, and his hobbies include cooking, fly fishing, and getting tattoos. Hideki, whenever you're ready, go ahead and start reading.
Thanks so much. I love that introduction. That was how I remembered it as well. I felt very fortunate that you told me about that, as the story sort of came about from that. So I'm going to be starting from the beginning of mine, and I'll read a little bit there. The story is titled The Heaven's Demand. Sky burials have taken place in the high mountains of Tibet since before Dadan's people began recording their history. No one knows exactly how long ago the death rituals started, because the vultures have always ingested every last bit of human remains. Long before he became a burial master, Dadan would lie for hours and watch as the large birds circled. He always had an affinity for the vultures, more than he ever had for people. It seemed natural that he was the child chosen to apprentice as the next burial master, which the people considered a necessary but unfortunate role. Because of how close a burial master is with the dead, the job is well suited for a person that most would prefer to avoid any association with. It wasn't that Dadan was an ugly man, quite the opposite. Many found his appearance alluring. It turns out that moving and dissecting bodies is tremendous exercise. His avoidant behavior might even strike some as mysterious, but there was something that his own people found off-putting about him. A darkness that dwelled inside him that most attributed to his routine handling of the dead. The ritual often began with a lone scout circling the skies, scanning the plateau for something to eat. In his early years, Dadan would flatten himself against the permafrost, perhaps finding a flat rock for a pillow, content atop the frozen terrain. He would lie in wait for the final and most important phase of the ceremony, the feeding. With experience, Dadan began to prefer wedging himself within the large folds of grasses and patiently waiting. His favorite type of terrain was becoming easier to find, even near the open expanses of the plateau that had been, for too long, too cold to house vegetation. But on this particular occasion, he found himself anxious and agitated. Dadan had spent the early morning hours preparing the body, somehow sensing he would need the full day. What he had been considering, his recent string of luck with Christina, was now threatening to be his undoing. He felt as though his own fate were tied to her departure. It was late in the afternoon when Dadan spied the vulture soaring outward from the Kunlun Mountains to the north. "Hello there, Singe," Dadan announced in the direction of the approaching bird. "What do you see?" Dadan had begun to call any lone vulture by the Tibetan word for lion after Christina had explained that her people called the magnificent birds Himalayan griffins. At first he laughed, because that was his way, but he liked the name. He had always known them to be regal animals. "Will you wait for this one?" Dadan asked. He and the vulture both knew one thing. Something was about to die. Christina once quizzed Dadan. "Do you know what the difference is between a vulture and a buzzard?" "A buzzard is a predatory bird that will only feed on living prey. A vulture, on the other hand, only feeds on carrion." "Carrion?" Dadan had asked. He was often intrigued and somewhat amused by his attraction to her, despite how dismissive of his culture she could be, and her periodic lectures about things she felt she needed to explain to him. He appreciated that she at least claimed to be deferential when it came to new and unfamiliar cultures. He actually considered himself extremely fortunate to have someone as worldly and beautiful as Christina be so interested in him, a man whose own people had trouble even looking him in the eye. Christina concluded her thought. Something that is already dead. Dadan wasn't sure what to make of her lesson. He could remember several times that he had seen vultures pluck live rodents out of the remains of the departed in which they burrowed. Perhaps they tasted better when they were smothered in prepared flesh. But Dadan had often thought that they had been angered by any insulting intrusions, knowing that the physical remains of the deceased had been placed there for them. The vultures shouldn't have worried about getting their pound of flesh. A 70-kilo man would provide more than enough meat for an entire venue of the animals, and he knew the birds understood their role in honoring the dead. The vultures certainly weren't the same as the mere scavengers that had managed to find themselves among the corpses, and so Dadan didn't argue the point. He didn't feel the need to describe the time he had seen a vulture finish off a fox that had wandered into one of his snares. He just shrugged his shoulders. Didon was usually content to listen. Christina gave him plenty to listen to. When they first met, Didon was not so surprised that a foreigner like Christina would approach him. While his own people steered clear of him, many tourists were fascinated by Didon's exotic death ritual, though most were men, and none ever seemed as interested as Christina. Most foreigners were careful to be respectful and attempted to be reverent, despite the death and decay that lingered in the air. Or perhaps, for some, that was the cause for reverence. But Christina's interest seemed to go deeper. Her insistence was fueled by a maniacal intrigue. While being approached by tourists was something that Didon had grown used to, Christina's appearance was sudden and unexpected. The night they met, he had been lying near the ceremonial circle, staring at the stars. He knew he wouldn't tire for quite some time because of the hunger. He had developed a custom of fasting when he was approaching a ceremony. The passive form of suffering had even become something that he would crave as part of the ritual. And I'll stop my reading there.
A good place to stop. Thank you so much. That's such a great story. And you are getting a lot of comments in the comment box. One thing that's happening is that some of our authors are they're only able to be in our private chat in the studio, and they're unable to get into the comment box because they need to log in with YouTube or Facebook or something. So what I'm going to do is make sure that the authors get those comments. I'll try to send them the comments about their stories so that they're able to see them. So thank you so much, Hideki. I'm going to kick you out. Get out. And our next story, I told you when I have a theme, so going back to beginnings, I've always loved fairy tales. As a little girl, I love fairy tales. I will make this theme work. I will. Our next author, the story that she submitted is a fairy tale. It has anthropomorphic birds. It has a lesson that's really poignant for us. And I'm going to have Holley jump in on the stage while I give her formal introduction. Holley Cornetto was born and raised in Alabama, but now lives in New Jersey. To indulge her love of books and stories, she became a librarian. She is also a writer because the only thing better than being surrounded by stories is to create them herself. I'm going to jump out and let her begin reading, but I will put some of her links in the comments for everybody to see. Go ahead, Holley.
Thank you so much. So just a little bit of context, I guess. With this, when I was introduced to the theme and told birds, the first thing that came to mind for me were fairy tales, fables. I think birds are such wonderful creatures that just in general, in my life, so much wonder and awe. I mean, there's just a variety of colors and sounds, and it's just birds are beautiful creatures. So the first thing in my mind is obviously these fairy tales, sometimes a little darker, because in addition to horror, I do love a good fairy tale. So as mentioned, mine kind of has a bit of a fairy tale fable vibe to it. It has some anthropomorphic bits to it. I'm going to read the opening because my tale, because of the way I structured it as a fairy tale and a fable, it is pretty short. It might be one of the shortest in the collection. So I'm going to start from the beginning and I'm going to read the first few pages of it. And I hope you enjoy. I was singing on the day I grew feathers. I'd always envied birds and wanted to join them on their flights of fancy. Flights of fancy was what my mother called it when I'd been daydreaming, when I was reading a book instead of washing the dishes or taking out the trash. One day I told her that I couldn't wait to grow wings and fly away. "Don't be in a rush to grow up," she said. "Flying is a lot of work and many things can knock you from the sky." I was 17 when she died. The day after her funeral, I noticed tiny bumps on my arms, and the spot between my shoulder blades began to itch. My father didn't talk about her death, and life seemed to carry on as it had always done. I whistled as I did the laundry. The whistling turned into humming, and the humming to singing. Feathers broke through my skin as I sang. My plumage was beautiful, black with blue shimmer, like my mother's. I told my father that I wanted to test my wings. "Don't be in such a rush to grow up," he said. "Just because you have wings doesn't mean you can fly." Days turned to weeks, and weeks to months, before my persistence wore him down. I went flying about town. I preened and ruffled my feathers. I stretched my neck and trilled, "Look at me, look at me." They did. They looked, and they talked. "They're jealous of my plumage," I thought. "They're jealous of my song." I felt invincible. I could fly anywhere. I turned heads when I flew. Some admirers followed as I flitted from tree to tree. Magpie was the boldest, leaving gifts for me to find. My father noticed the gifts and began to worry. "I wish your mother were here. She would know what to say." He asked my grandmother to speak to me. She tisk-tisked, surveying the gifts left for me. "You must learn how to judge those who admire you." I pointed to the jewels. "He can be judged by the quality of the gifts." Grandmother shook her head. "Nothing of value can be judged solely by its appearance." "But surely beautiful things are good." "Eyes can be fooled. Some beauty is only seen by the heart." "I don't understand." "Then let me speak plainly. Magpie collects finery to show off. He does not cherish things, only cares that he possesses them." I ran my feathers across a fine silk scarf. "If he brings me such gifts, he must value me." To him, things exist to impress others. He doesn't value them, nor will he value you. I nodded again, though not sure I understood. Unconvinced, my grandmother sighed. When spring came, Magpie left trinkets beneath my window. At first I ignored them, but one day he left a miniature carved from ebony. I studied the intricately carved feathers and realized it was made in my likeness, a testament in ebony to my beauty. In the end, I gave in and flew with him. He lavished me with precious stones and silver and gold. I felt appreciated. In time, I found my bracelets were not ornaments, but shackles, binding me to his side. My home was not a cozy nest, but a gilt cage. "Why am I caged?" I asked Magpie. "To display your beauty, of course." "Can my beauty not be displayed on your arm?" "You will lay soon. Best to keep you and our beautiful chicks safe." I spent my days weeping. Soon I did lay, and I cared for my eggs night and day. I sang to them and bathed them in my tears. But sadness is not a fertile soil in which to grow, and so only one egg hatched. And I'm going to leave it there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. There's a lot of comments. I'm trying to save them all in the comment box. People are loving the fairy tale theme, loving your voice while you're reading. So thank you so much, Holley, for reading for us tonight. We are getting there, people. Our next story, you know, on the one hand, I'm reading it and I'm thinking, I've been here. I've been down this road. I've been to this yard sale. I recognize everything. And then on the other hand, I was like, where are we going? And this is a trip. This story takes you on a trip, both literally and figuratively. It's very exciting. I'm going to bring our author to the stage and do her formal introduction, and I will be putting things in the chat as well. Niki Kallio is the author of the short fiction collection Finding the Bones. Her essay Cold Front appeared in the anthology Heroics, Women's Lived Experiences During the Coronavirus Pandemic. Niki worked as a newspaper journalist and editor on both coasts before coming home to Wisconsin, where she works as a freelance writer and editor. Niki, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that great introduction. I appreciate it. And so glad to be a part of the anthology. And yes, my story The Cardinal starts at a yard sale, and all you need to know is my protagonist, Lynn, is searching for vintage items and furniture that she can refurbish and sell. And she has been directed to an estate sale, but winds up at the wrong house. The Cardinal figurine from the rummage sale continued to observe her from the dashboard. She reached out and took it in her hand, holding it, feeling the ridges of its wings and crest, then pushed it under the atlas on the passenger seat. In the distance, the cauliflower clouds grew taller and deeper gray. There were a couple of power poles along the road at wind-blown angles. She looked for a road sign or mile marker to help tell her where she was. She'd check the next house for a fire number to see if she could get a clue as to how close or far away this sale might be. She had seen no signs along the road, except for the random homemade plywood billboard just ahead. It was painted yellow with black block letters. Hell is real. Lynn grabbed her phone again to see if the location services had resumed, which they sometimes did if you drove a little while, re-entering the invisible bubble of coverage. She knew she shouldn't be checking apps while driving, but she rationalized that no other drivers were anywhere to be seen. The map still wasn't connecting, but other things were. A few alerts past their time indicated a fast-moving storm. She opened a weather app and checked the radar, seeing the angry red splotch moving closer in the west. Now, though, she caught a glimpse of neon, possibly a handmade sign indicating where the estate sale was supposed to be. Likely the sale would be close to over or shut down given the impending storm, and also given that it was getting close to 11 o'clock. These sales tended to attract a swarm in the morning and die out before lunch. Lynn doubted that she'd find anything left worth purchasing, even if it was still open. Certainly the dressers that the lady at the rummage had mentioned would be gone. It would be down to old Tupperware, polyester clothes, chipped figurines, and used bathroom rugs. But she was almost there. She might as well stop and search for things someone else may have overlooked. Maybe the threat of the storm had kept others away and there would be lots of treasures left. Maybe going about her normal business would shake herself from the feeling that everything suddenly felt wrong. In the distance, Lynn spotted something bright green with streaks of black fluttering in the breeze. A handwritten tagboard sale sign, crumpled, but visible near an overgrown gravel drive. The estate sale. She pressed the gas and aimed the truck toward the driveway, passing only one other driveway before reaching the gravel near the sodden neon sign. The sign was wrapped around a mailbox post pinned there only by the wind. Lynn edged the truck into the narrow driveway, which was lined with clusters of weeds and seemed to divide a wetland and a thicket of trees. Lynn stopped the truck and peered down the gravel lane. The house wasn't visible from the road. Impulsively, she pulled the emergency brake and exited the truck, stepping over to the mailbox to peel the now sodden sign from it. The sign was torn and scuffed with mud and appeared to have previously been fastened to a yard stake. The sign simply read, "Estate sale here," in black marker, forgoing an address in favor of large lettering. She checked the address on the mailbox, and it apparently matched the one on the smudged newspaper, depending on if the illegible number on the newsprint had in fact ended in a 3. She checked the mailbox for a name. If you see Mickler's on the mailbox, I'd keep driving. Lynn noticed a faded red paint, not a name, but someone had added a cardinal to the side of the metal box. Well, I guess that's a sign. The angels are leading me toward vintage. The air seemed to get heavier as the wind picked up. Lynn pulled herself back into the truck and released the brake, turning slowly down the driveway, the tall weeds and spindly trees so closely flanking the truck that they brushed against the windows on either side. The driveway curved several times, making it impossible to see her destination. Finally, the vegetation gave way to a gravel parking area in front of a bungalow-style home that was in good repair, but was at least as old as her Aunt Patricia. The property included a metal utility barn behind the house and a wooden barn behind the metal one, which sported a painted cross similar to the one she'd seen earlier. There were some fenced areas, but no livestock. Someone had recently mowed a patch of lawn around the house, which on a sunny day would be shaded by a very old oak tree, which also overlooked a man-made pond, which was watched over by a bathtub Mary with plastic flowers at her feet. Despite the property maintenance, Lynn had the feeling no one lived here. Then she came upon a section of driveway which had been widened as a makeshift parking lot adjacent to the home. This contained several parked cars, and Lynn felt a rush of relief, not realizing her body had been carrying tension. She located a place at the end, furthest from the house, parked near a vintage black car, and she paused a minute, surveying the yard. Everyone else is inside the house, Lynn thought. She exited the truck, hitching her wallet purse strap over her shoulder, and shut the truck door. There were no other sounds. She heard no birds. She heard no voices. As she walked past the other cars, she noticed they were all vintage, possibly not functional, and likely belonged to whoever owned the house. The cardinal in the mailbox was pointing toward the road, Lynn thought. Maybe the angel was telling me to keep moving. And I'll stop there.
Ooh, and is Lynn a final girl or not? You'll have to read it and find out what happens to her at this creepy sale. Thank you so much, Niki, for reading it. People are loving it in the comments. I'm going to throw you out now. And last but not least, we have a writer who I have shared table of contents with. I do want to go to my in the beginning, but no, I'd be lying if I said that we did in the beginning of our careers. But I have been following her career very closely and will continue to do so. She's been doing some wonderful things that I hope all of you will follow as well. So let me give the formal introduction. C.O. Davidson work has appeared in Pseudopod, Bastarian, Cemetery Gates, and in various horror anthologies. She co-edited Monsters of Film, Fiction, and Fable, and is a founding member of the Atlanta chapter of the Horror Writers Association. She teaches writing, the Gothic, and horror at Middle Georgia State University and lives with her husband, Andy, and their 11, yes, count them, 11 cats. That is quite a lot. And I will put her Substack link in the chat as she reads. Crystal, go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Thank you for that introduction, Elaine. Yes, and my story seems to have more cat than bird, at least in the excerpt that I'm going to read for y'all tonight. Inspired by the quote from Thoreau, I rejoice that there are owls. This story about an academic couple who bought a house in the country, the husband's dream, but quickly he loses interest. And soon he's spending more evenings back on campus, sometimes with a certain French teacher, rather than living his authentic Thoreau-inspired life with his wife, Lainey, who discovers her own secret authenticity, rejoicing in the power of a mysterious feathered entity in the woods. This is an excerpt from my story, A Parliament in the Woods, days after Chuck and Lainey have moved into their new house in the country. Jesus Christ! Oh, Jesus! Lainey ran into the sunroom. What is it? Chuck stood at the open storm door, staring down in dismay. Shoulders shaking, he pointed down at the mat, and Lainey looked. There, a dead rabbit, just the head, a green bottlefly perched at the edge of a blue eye, staring up at Chuck and Lainey. Just off the mat, a neat pile of guts, black ants already trailing ribbon up the stairs toward it. Oh, I'm so sorry, Lainey said. I guess we can bury this in the field? Chuck backed away, palms up. I'm not touching that, he said, and retreated into the den. Lainey sighed and retrieved the shovel from the shed, scooped up the remains, and brought them into the field, digging a hole and burying them. She hosed off the porch. She knew this had been the work of the cat. Last Tuesday, Chuck was at the university teaching one of his evening classes, and Lainey had been sitting on the back porch, serenaded by pond frogs while she drank wine. Into her third glass, a large striped tabby came slinking out of the meadow, up the back steps, and flopped at her feet. He looked up at Laney. He had a snaggletooth that pulled his upper lip into a rakish sneer. Delighted, she called him a big, pretty boy, and he answered with a purr, like an old outboard motor turning over. He then shifted to an angle that allowed him to lick his prodigious balls. That evening, Laney fed him leftover chicken strips, but the next day she bought a bag of kibble and cans of cat food, all now stored in the back of the pantry. Then came almost daily gifts: dead robins, baby mice, that so far Laney had managed to hide from Chuck, except for the rabbit incident, which she blamed on a fox. Her husband knew nothing of foxes apart from his one encounter, and less about cats, only that he was an opponent of those who fed the stray cat population on campus. An invasive species, he'd tell people like the biologists who cared about such things. Laney had bought a carrier that she stashed behind unpacked moving boxes in a deep hall closet and planned to coax the cat into the box and take him to the vet for shots and to permanently fix those balls. But the vet wasn't open in the evenings when Chuck was on campus, and the cat would creep out of the meadow and up the porch steps. It didn't matter that Laney met the cat with a food bowl already down. He would always wind around her legs and then lean in for pets before he ate. Afterwards, he'd curl up at her feet or sit at the top of the steps, staring into the woods, staying for hours. Only when Chuck's car finally pulled into the drive, the cat would slink down the steps and into the meadow, vanishing into the tree line, just as Chuck walked up those steps. Chuck would grin, and Laney would often smell beer, sometimes a whiff of perfume. Not hers. She wondered if it were French. Several years ago, Laney had seen a PBS documentary on Thoreau. While the writer was living in the woods, an experiment away from society that he'd later record in Walden, the cabin he built was actually only a few miles from town, where he'd often visit his aunt around dinner time. According to his Concord neighbors, once, while Thoreau was cooking fish on the perimeter of the woods, a spark jumped from his fire, starting a blaze that blighted a swath of the woods for decades. Laney thought about that documentary while putting the wire around Chuck's vegetable garden to keep the deer from eating the rest. While walking to the mailbox or loading garbage cans into Chuck's shiny truck to take the trash to a dump a county away, she noticed a few cars slowing down as they drove by the house. Then she saw what they did: the weedy beds and tall grass. "I'm wilding the entire yard, even the front. People just can't appreciate the natural world," Chuck said. But Laney became conscious of those cars, likely from town, and what they now thought about these people who bought this old house, one with some history here. She began weeding the front beds and eventually mowing the lawn, no longer annoyed that Chuck had spent so much on a zero-turn riding mower, one that he had ridden only once to cut a partial trail into the underbrush of the woods. Laney, not Chuck, began walking that trail and soon beyond it, every day pushing farther into the woods before turning back, plucking through the understory, climbing over logs, the cat, now Rupert, following. And I'll stop there.
Chuck, I hate him. Thank you so much for reading that. Again, I am gathering the comments that are in the chat, and we'll try to send those out. What a wonderful reading. Thank you so much. I'm going to invite everyone back to the stage. So Lee is coming back. Kiyomi's coming back. Who's next? Niki, Holley, and Hideki. And make sure your mics are unmuted now. If anybody, we had a very active comment box. I really appreciate that. People are really enjoying this. I think people are now able to see why I have been crowing about this book. Because it is so wonderful. It's such a diverse collection. The stories are just amazing. And as I said, we have 2 more sessions coming up. But I do want to give everybody a chance to promote. Is there anything that any of you have coming up that you would like to promote? Feel free. Don't be shy. Kiyomi, anything?
I have something I'm working on, but it's not finished yet.
What's that, Lee?
So
Lay it on us.
it's going to be all right. It's going to be called The Annex.
Okay.
It's going to be part short story collection, part novella, a little bit of combination of both. And it's going to be a group of stories that all take place in the same mental asylum.
Ooh, nice. Love it.
I'm this close to being done, so it's almost there.
Very good. Keep going. Keep going. Of course, I will read that when that is available. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else have anything? Crystal, anything you want to share? Nikki?
I have a story coming out in Brady Cat Press, their rage themed issue that's coming out soon. And it's about, vengeful killer sorority girls. So,
Ooh,
That sounds fun.
that's right up my alley. Yeah. Okay. Very nice. Anyone else have anything you'd like to share that's coming? Yes, Nikki, please.
I will have a short story coming out in the Wisconsin Writers Association anthology Harvest of Horror. It's a story called Spirit Box, and it's about a ghost hunter who is hunting a deceased serial killer.
Ooh, that's
Sounds
exciting.
interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very nice. And certainly if people don't want to share right now, I've been putting ways that we can follow you in the comment box. So please keep your eyes out for these authors because I am so grateful for the gifts that they've given me in terms of these stories. As I was collecting these stories, I couldn't believe, I was like, you gave me your best of your best. And not that I expected any less than that, but I was just kind of like, oh my God, they gave me this story that's so amazing. And so I hope everyone sort of has that feeling when they're reading it of like, wow, this really is the best of the best. Any final comments from people in the comments? You've been so engaged, and I really love that. Nothing. It looks like we're I know we're winding. No, it's getting late. I am so old that I'm like looking at my watch, like I can barely stay awake. So what I would like to do then, if no one has anything else, I would like to wrap this up. And as you know, your godmother loves you, and your godmother grants wishes, but sometimes she makes requests. And right now, her request is that everybody here, authors, audience, people from the future watching the recording, be kind to yourselves because you deserve kindness. Okay? Your godmother loves you. I want you to be kind. So I am going to end this stream. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Thank you